Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wa yaqimuna salat. And he sets upright the prayer. This is from Surah Al-Baqarah, ayat 6. Today's topic I would like to speak on how to set upright the prayer. The promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam has given us a guideline of how we can find concentration and contentment in our prayers. He says that we should pray to Allah for help and have a constant personal struggle. In Malfuzat, the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam is recorded to have said, after this, in honor of a righteous person, Allah the Exalted states, وَيَقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ, meaning he sets upright the prayer. Here to set upright has been stated. This also alludes to the forced effort that is specific to a righteous person. When such a person begins the prayer, he must ward off countless evil whisperings, due to which his prayer falls repeatedly, as it were, and he must hold it up. When he says Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest, to begin the prayer, a swarm of evil temptations rush to dissipate his heart's concentration. These thoughts lead a person to a far-off place, causing him distress, but he goes on fighting to the death in order to acquire this concentration and contentment in prayer. With great anguish, such a person forever remains concerned about keeping erect his falling prayer. He repeats the words, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Thee alone do we worship, and thee alone do we implore for help. In this supplication, man implores that his prayer may be established and seeks to be guided to the right path so that his prayer may be set upright. In the face of these evil whisperings, a muttaqi is like a child who implores earnestly and humbly before God. He weeps before Allah and concedes that he falls true to the following, Akhlada ilal ard, but he inclined to the earth. This is the war that a muttaqi must wage with his inner self during the prayer, and this is what results in the acquisition of spiritual reward. So here the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam, he explains that there is a spiritual reward that we get when we are constantly struggling to hold upright our prayer, to have concentration. And even we know that we are constantly bombarded by so many evil distractions and evil thoughts that are taking us out of the prayer. And he says here that we acquire spiritual reward for this effort. Then he goes on to say that there are some who, in the prayer, desire to rid themselves of evil distractions immediately. Although yuqimuna salata, he establishes the prayer indicates something quite the opposite. So he's saying that it's not like we can just repeat this prayer, we can concentrate and immediately we're going to be free. No, that he says no. Is Allah unaware? So Hazur is going to explain that what we have to do. Then he says that Hazrat Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, may Allah have mercy on him, states that spiritual reward is earned only until strenuous efforts remain. So he said that states that spiritual reward is earned only until strenuous efforts remain. So we should have constant effort in our prayers. When these efforts cease to exist, spiritual reward no longer remains either. In other words, fasting and prayer are considered deeds only as long as one is required to struggle against evil temptation to perform them. However, when these deeds attain a higher status, and the one who fasts and observes the prayer escapes the clutches of forced effort and develops an inherent inclination to virtue, fasting and observing prayer no longer remain to be deeds. So he's saying that as a person, struggles and they get into the habit of this, virtue and prayer and fasting all become a second nature, and they no longer, it's no longer considered anymore as a deed, and so therefore it shouldn't be you won't be getting a similar type of reward. But Hazur very beautifully explains this after saying that then Hazrat Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani goes on to raise the question himself. He goes on, raise the question himself, does this mean that such a person is exempt from observing prayer? For spiritual reward was only attainable until a person was required to make a forced effort. The fact of the matter is that prayer no longer remains to be a deed, rather it becomes a reward in itself. So when we get into prayer so much that it becomes habitual, we enjoy it. Hazur is saying, then the reward is not that spiritual reward which we work against, fighting against our evil inclination, because that's not there anymore. He said the reward is the delight, the pleasure we get when we say the prayer without any distractions at all. This prayer becomes the nourishment of such a person and the delight of their eyes. It is a paradise on earth. On the contrary, those engaged in strenuous effort are in a state of battle, while the other has already attained salvation. So there is describing two type of people, two type of worshipers. Those who have, they have it became part of their second nature, and they're having heaven in this world, and they're the other ones who constantly are battling. This means that when a person's spiritual journey finishes, their trial also comes to an end. For example, if an Enoch were to say that he has never cast a glance upon a woman, or what favor or spiritual reward is he deserving? Such a person does not even possess the characteristic of casting lustful glances. However, if a man possessing virility were to restrain his glances, he would indeed be worthy of spiritual reward. Similarly, an individual must pass through thousands of stages. In certain cases, his constant practice invests within him a strength. So he's saying that this is a very important thing, that when we pray to Allah and we are constantly waging this battle, we should never think that the struggle and the practice that we are doing is not going to give us benefit. He's saying here that this struggle, this constant struggle itself, will invest within us a strength. So we'll get this great benefit from this this struggle. When a person makes peace with his inner self, he enters a sort of paradise, but the same degree of spiritual reward is no longer warranted. Such a person has already engaged in a transaction of which he continues to reap benefit. However, this does not possess the same state of as before. An action performed repeatedly by forced effort eventually takes on the form of a natural disposition in man. A person who inherently attains pleasure in something cannot be deterred from it. He finds himself naturally inclined. And so, when a person is at the level known as righteousness, so he's talking about a different level, when he's known at the level of righteousness or ittiqa, where they must force themselves to perform good with strenuous effort, they are still impaired, as it were, and the nature of their virtue is still incomplete. So to summarize what the promised Messiah alayhi salam is saying in this very beautiful quotation from Malfuzat, is that this first, that he says that if we want to establish our prayers, set them upright, we should turn to Allah, beseeching His help. In the beautiful prayer he mentioned from the Surah Fatiha, Iyaka nabudu wa iyaka nasta'in. Thee alone do we beseech for help. Thee alone do we worship. Or the other way around. So then he says that we should constantly wage a war against the self and evil whisperers. This should be constant. And then it should be a forced effort. And this is needed in order for a person to gain pleasure in their prayer, to get into that, at being like a habit. And then after, quite a long struggle, the Prophet explains here, it's quite a big struggle. They become inherently inclined towards virtue and prayer. It becomes something of a second nature. It becomes their, inclination to do it. They enjoy doing it. And he said nothing can pull them away from it. And that itself is the paradise. That's the blessing. And his says then it gets to the higher level of reward, that prayer is a reward in itself, and the paradise is realized in the form of this contentment with prayer. So, in explaining this, and he said that at the very end of this cycle or this journey is that the trials will come to an end. So a person will be so content with their prayers, they'll love them so much that anything will not detract them from that. So the trials, as it were, that pull a person away from the prayer will not be there. That's what it's meant by this. Doesn't mean that trials will be finished, just that the trials of the inner self will be finished, and they will have peace with themselves. And this is what paradise means, that you can find it here and should find it here. So my brothers and sisters, this is the reward that we should be looking for, we should be thinking about, we should be praying for, and this should motivate us every day, thinking that yes, we would like to be at that high state, like anyone who is on a journey, and they would like to traverse the earth, and they would like to climb a mountain, they would like to climb higher and higher peaks. So a person has to struggle, they have to exercise, they have to prepare, they have to do a lot of effort. It's a long road ahead. But a person who gets a delight stage by stage, Allah shows to them, He gives them sweetness in their prayer, and sometimes then they feel a struggle, it's hard, then sometimes evil inclination come, but then they remember, no, I had this feeling in my prayer, I want to gain it back, like when we are during Jalsa Salana or during Ramadan, which we just passed, where we were offering our prayer, we were offering the Tahajjud prayer, we were listening to Dars, we were reading Quran and learning things. These things we would like to have with us, and we would like to have that state with us all the time. So these are the delight which give us a satisfaction which we're looking forward, and like anything in life, we have to struggle for it. So in the end, we should all pray that may Allah grant us the strength to set upright our prayers and derive pure satisfaction and delight from them. Ameen. Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.